Thank you for coming, Kathleen. It's really good to see you again. I always enjoy being in your energy and your space, and I'd like to thank you for being one of the leading women in my life when I came out in the 90s, and for everything that you've
Hmm.
done to help London be progressive as we are trying to be in our community. Tell us about yourself. Kathleen Holland, who are you?
Well, first of all, thank you for that warm welcome, Maggie. I appreciate that. And as far as back at the beginning of my coming out stage, that took place while I was an employee at the former London Public School Board. And so back at that time, it would have been in the early to mid 90s. And it just so happened I was in a relationship with an American woman. And it was clear to me that if she were to move here, I wouldn't be able to offer her what every other colleague could offer a spouse, of their choosing. So it really just sort of brought me down a road where I teamed up with other like-minded individuals, and these like-minded individuals were a collection of men and women, and what we did is we met to do some activism. We were trying to rally the troops in terms of meeting up with provincial and federal government officials, including school board employees, the ones that were at the administrative level, the unions, because we wanted to explain to them that having the basic right of same-sex spousal benefits to be able to offer our significant other is something that every other person assumed they could have when they were hired by the board. And so that was something that took a little bit of effort because, for one, it wasn't something that they had been faced with before. I think they just didn't know there was a need. So in the mid-90s, this group of us, that includes you as well, there was a group of teachers that I was coordinating events for, and most of them were just social events. The name of the group was TALL, Teachers Association of London Lesbians. And I myself was in an employee group that did not have the backing of a union. I was a field naturalist and I was part of a staff association. Just so happened I was president of it. So any sort of communications that were going on with the senior administration at the board to the various unions and staff association, I was a recipient of and could therefore share that information with members. But as you may remember, probably back around 1993-94 is when we had a meeting with the senior administration, explained our situation, and you know what? I was relieved to see that they saw value in it. And that is what led to them being able to offer us same-sex spousal benefits. And that was well in advance of the Canadian government being able to offer that or mandate that was something that all members of our community should have extended to them. So anyway, so that worked out really well, and I guess we just continued sort of moving in that vein. So that's where my beginning activism stemmed from at the school board. But I found that they were very willing candidates to test the waters. However, I do recall that they didn't necessarily want me to share that message from their rooftops. So I was kind of silenced in that way. They said, Kathleen, we are giving you this information as president of your employee group, but this isn't where you can, do TV interviews. And so in that way, I kind of had to try to understand it from their perspective, but it was very difficult because I was so proud of them for having taken that position. So same-sex spousal benefits was the door opener, and things have continued to move forward ever since then. So a lot of the work that I've done in the community was more in the social vein. There's also a women's group, Adventurous Women of London. It's been around since 1990, and the first couple of years, I was just the beneficiary of a group of women that put it together, and we get together and do various events, whether it was camping, bowling, horseback riding, canoeing, all kinds of fun things, touch football. We're all probably in our 20s at that time. Anyway, we did all kinds of really great things, but a couple years in, they asked if I would take it over as the coordinator, and so I've been doing that ever since, so about 1992. And interestingly enough, this interview is being recorded in 2025. This is the final year of AWOL. So we are winding down AWOL 35 years later. It's been an awesome run, and I'm so pleased that I've been there for all of this time. Here's an interesting story. Even about 2 months ago, as much as this is going to be viewed at times outside of the political environment that we're in right now, I received a phone call from a woman in New York State who has a trans child and says, I need to move her out of the US. can you help me to make contacts? And so I gave her some guidance in terms of immigration lawyers to consider. So that's the kind of service that I wasn't intending to provide through AWOL, but that's something that has sort of, come into my lap because of the fact that I always attach my phone number along with the newsletter. And but I'm pleased to be able to help people out that sometimes have no idea of which way to go. So that's how things started off. Back in the early 2000s, Rogers TV had asked if I would do a volunteer role of a TV reporter. So it was a show called Today's Q, and that is where I was able to interview allies and members of the community, and I think give the broader community of London, Ontario, a sense of the kinds of contributions that people were making. So there were many men that I knew from my various connections socially, but also politically, that I had incorporated into the interview lineup. A lot of women as well, but most meaningful to me was the interview that I did with my parents, and I was so proud of them for agreeing to do it. But what the gist of that particular interview is how it affected them during my coming out, 20 years earlier. So anyway, so we touched on a lot of subjects during the show, Today's Q, and that ran for a season. There was a person who did it prior to me, but that was as long as I was involved in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you go back to that coming out story and your parents? And that didn't happen in London, but what was their reaction to you? What was their journey with you like? Or maybe the journey wasn't with you? And can you just talk a little bit about that? Those are part of our stories that the kids are interested in hearing.
So when my coming out experience took flight, I would have been in my mid to late 20s. And it just so happened that I came out to my mother, and it wasn't something that she necessarily had anticipated would be part of the conversation. So she did have a lot of trouble with it. I was raised Roman Catholic, and for that reason, I found myself drifting away from the church, because the church was really clear that if you're a member of the gay community, you're not welcome to be in that condition in the church. So I guess if I were to change my condition, I would have been welcome with open arms. But that wasn't my inclination.
But did anybody offer to help you try to change that condition?
No, I didn't have that. There was nobody that was trying to coerce me to move down a different pathway that was unnatural for me. So what happened with that is my mother learned about this, and she didn't handle it very well, like in terms of it was very difficult for her, and she figured it was a phase. Kathleen's strong-headed. She's just going through a phase, and she'll come out the other side. Well, as it turns out, she told my dad. And my dad is who was supposed to be angry with her so they could be two angry parents. It turns out he was one that was more accepting, and they were living in Windsor. I grew up in Windsor, but moved to London to go to Western. And so what happened was my dad came up to see me privately, and he said, "Your mother tells me that you're gay, and I want to be able to talk to you." And so really, he just wanted to hear me out. That is what was an interesting turning point. I think it's because if you give a parent a chance, sometimes we don't. We anticipate we are going to know that you'll have this unbreakable bond. My mom and I were always very tight, very close. And fortunately, that did not change, but it was something where she didn't understand it. So what she and my dad started to do is they started going out to parents, friends, and PFLAG. Yes. Yeah. And they started going out to those meetings. And so that was a good stepping stone for them to sort of gain some understanding from other people that were familiar with perhaps the shock, maybe the disappointment. Oh my gosh, I was supposed to have the big wedding, My brother, he of course married his wife. Well, it's all about the bride, so it's all about the bride's family. Then my sister, she married a divorcee. Well, then you tend to have smaller weddings. I was supposed to have the big fancy wedding so that all of their friends and relatives and people down the street, so they could all come. It turns out that I think was a real big disappointment. Turns out, Maggie, I did have the wedding. I had it in 2014 to my bride, Shannon, with whom I've been in a relationship since 2011, so about 14 years now. And my parents were both at that wedding. her parents were both at that wedding. And the reason I say both is because since that time, my mother passed away. But I was very happy to have shared that moment with both my parents because right to the end, my mom and I remained very, very close. So she passed away a few years ago, just at the start of COVID, but actually it was due to dementia. So she was going through a debilitating disease. And so fortunately, because they had moved to London to go into long-term care, Shannon and I were able to spend a huge volume of time with my mom. Turns out I married my mom. Oh. Shannon is very similar in her interests and her mannerisms and things like that. And so it's really neat. The two of them bonded very, very well. And so I'm really glad that for my mom's final years, she was able to spend it with the two of us here in London. My dad moved as well, but I mean, he lived in a retirement home. So that's kind of how that time went.
Good. Thanks for sharing that, because I think that's really, really important. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced and some of the activism that you were doing in trying to establish norms, I would say, for social groups, for political positions, for awareness and outness, if you will, within the city?
Yeah. I would have to say that overall, I had a pretty easy ride. And that is the reason I kept telling individuals that I was really proud of the progressiveness of London, Ontario. And I know there will be people that will have a memory more so of a mayor that we had at one time in the mid-90s who refused to proclaim Pride Week. And it became a huge issue where she lost the case in a human rights battle because she refused, do you want her name? Mm-hmm. Diane Haskett. Mm-hmm. And so she's the one that I think put a really negative spin on it and made a lot of us feel like, I can't believe all the progress that's being made, and then we have a person who's maybe sticking to what she feels are her religious values. I mean, I was raised Roman Catholic, and my parents came around, because sometimes people don't feel they have to face a person's, being a member of the LGBTQ plus community unless they're in their family. And maybe Diane never had that benefit. So anyway, that was what was unfortunate for the community. But I mean, then we just, we outlive our mayors and they move on to the next one and then things get better. And fortunately, that's what happened in our community, because our community has had a wonderful Pride celebration since the mid-1990s. And actually prior to that, just to give you a little bit of history, the Halo Club was our social club. The building was paid for through a bequest of a member in the community. It was an owned facility. It wasn't something anybody could get kicked out of. And it was one where we could have dances, but they also had many, many other services. So there were 2 floors to the Halo. On the second floor is where they would have social services, like they'd have AA meetings. They'd have card playing. They'd have Al-Anon meetings. There'd be all kinds of other things. That's actually where the first Pride art show took place, is on the second level, with Bruce Flowers taking me on my very first tour. Bruce Flowers was a wonderful man who was involved in activism and a close friend of mine, and he passed away a few years ago. And but otherwise, yeah, he was a great strength in the community and a wonderful artist. So he was the one that was the original curator and continued in that role for many years. So that is where the first Pride art show took place. And in fact, we used to be able to enjoy Pride on the grounds of the Halo Club, where we'd overflow onto the parking lot and even the street. So anyway, so it was those are very fond memories, but it wasn't fond for everybody. And here's what I mean. In the early days, when I would go out to the bar before my community activism had kicked in the certainly well prior to my being part of the community, on certain nights of the week, there were men's dances. And there would be a hired security guard that would make sure people did not get beaten up standing in line to enter the building. And so there was obviously a very difficult period of time that many people had to suffer through. And so that's, so that would have been, I'm not exactly sure how long it took place for in London, but during my time, I at least got to see that we'd walk past security on the outside of the building so we could get safely inside the building. But I'll have to tell you, we also had a booming community, because we not only had the Halo, we also had, at any given time, 2 or more other gay bars in the London area. So you could conceivably go from one to the next to the next. So we had 52nd Street, which had this unwritten thing where given by, like, I guess designated by the music, women would go there because that's where women like to dance. A couple blocks away, there would be Lacey's, which was another bar that, because of the music, attracted the men. So we could bring our friends, men and women, everybody was welcome to go into any of the bars. It's just, you know, you had a place where you knew it was close to the community, and that's basically it. You could bring your friends, you know, from the straight community. That was absolutely fine. But I mean, it was a place where we felt we were safe and we could dance with a person that was special to us. So that's what life was like, but it wasn't always, you know, fun and games. It's just something that evolved over time. And I hear a lot of people say that now they don't necessarily need to have a gay bar, and it's because they feel like they can be part of the LGBTQ plus community anywhere. And you know what? That's absolutely true. And here's the reason it's true. It's because we're living in Canada.
True. That's an absolutely huge factor for us
Right.
that we need to be grateful for. However, I was asked the other day by a member of the city staff, why is there still a need for queer exclusive space?
Yep.
And so, you know, when we talk about that, we talk about there still is a need to be in safe space because the backlash against our community is rising right now, and not everybody feels safe in what we consider heteronormative space. And so there is still that quest to have, you know, a unique space where we feel like we are protected and safe to be whoever we are.
And I think one of the ways to help put it back into their hands to consider is when they have gone out perhaps for dinner with their spouse and it's an anniversary or something special they're celebrating, if they happen to touch their spouse's hand or kiss their spouse, do they feel fear? Mm-hmm. Because I'll tell you, it's not something I do. I don't do it in public spaces. So if I can go on to my second career, my first career was the one where I worked at the school board, and it was a great career, and I worked with wonderful staff, but I was not out to the staff. I was not out to the staff at large or to the parents. Why? Because I didn't want them to have to worry, you know, about anything being caught by the kids, right? And that's the thing, that parents who didn't understand that we're just born this way. That's the way it is. You know, it's not something you catch. So what happened is, after I finished with my career at the school board, because then I went into self-employment and became a financial planner, I went back into the closet. Let me finish off with the school board. The school board saw me as an out person, also felt like I was somebody they felt if they put me up to in-service administration, I would probably handle it in a way that would be like on a more professional level. And so they allowed me opportunities like that, which I'm very grateful for, because then that helped to in-service, you know, people who are decision makers on something they maybe understood to a very small extent. So now fast forward, there I was really out. Now I go on to a self-employment career as a financial planner at Investors Group, and I went right back into the closet. And it's not because of my colleagues, it's because of clients. If clients did not like something about me, they could fire me. There's no Employee Standards Act. You are self-employed, they are paying you, and so they can fire you. And so if they find out that you're from the LGBTQ plus community and they don't like that or they don't understand that, they could easily just, leave your book of business in that sense. So I had to be very careful how I approached that subject. And I remember when Shannon and I were on the doorstep of getting married in 2014, and I had such great clients, and some of them were seniors, and they say, "Oh, you're wearing a ring." And I said, "Yes, I am." And then I would just let it fall off because I didn't want to risk them saying, "What is his name?" Right? I feel like I didn't want to have to say, "Well, his name is Shannon." Yeah. And I guess that can be a man's name, but it wasn't in my case. So I just avoided having to out myself to the community. However, there were times when they would see me out at the Pride Parade because maybe that's what they were inclined to go off and see. And it was great because then it was a matter of they got to learn one more thing about me, right? But my colleagues were a different story. They saw Shannon as an extension of me. And so when we would go to my big fancy pants Christmas party in my evening gown, I would be on the dance floor with her. And they were all great with that, you know. So I was very, very fortunate that I had a work environment that was nurturing and fostering of that kind of good feeling. But it turns out, now that I retired in 2020, and I don't have to care at all. I don't have to worry about losing clients or anything. But in retirement is when I moved over to doing very much like our videographer is doing for us today. I started a YouTube channel where Shannon is very much a part of it, and I go for my hikes through the woods, or I go paddling, or we go camping. So there are times when she's in it, and there are times when she's not in it, but for every single episode, she lays the music tracks. So when I'm filming wildlife, and maybe there's something precarious going on, she'll put that music that makes you feel like there must be Jaws just around the corner. And people get a real kick out of her music selections, but there's also quite the Zen feel when they're just watching me going past waterfalls and things of that nature. So to that I say, I am out 110%, because everyone who watches those episodes of Hiking with Kathleen, they know that Shannon is my wife. She is in episodes sometimes, but she's involved in every single one of them with her creativity.
When you were working for investors, did you feel a sense of compromising who you were by not coming out to your clients? And the reason I ask that is because we have done so much in human rights and progression of human rights and entitlement to be authentically who you are. But there are times when it serves a purpose not to come out always. But did that feel like that was a compromise to you, or just a prudent decision for your business?
It was both. It was a prudent decision for my business, and it was a huge compromise. And it unfortunately just became this way, that when I would run into people, say I'd be at a trade show and Shannon was there, maybe she and I were just enjoying the trade show together, and then she saw that I was going over and speaking with people. She didn't know if they were maybe from my business world, maybe they were clients. And so she would just, kind of move off to, be on her own until I finished up the conversation, because she didn't want to compromise anything for me. So that was always at the forefront of our mind, because if clients didn't know about me, then it wasn't something I was going to put in front of them. And as I say, risk the relationship. And I know people can say, well, then it probably wasn't a very good or a very strong relationship. And that may very well be, or it could very well be somebody who was guided by what they felt were their religious values. And that's maybe what dictated a lot of things for them in life. And so that was one thing I didn't discuss. I didn't discuss religion, and I didn't discuss my lesbianism. I discussed their numbers. And so then that was pretty safe to be able to do it that way.
And so do you feel victorious now that you're able to really be Kathleen?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I'm out absolutely 110%. And so when I run into people out in the woods, oftentimes they'll say, they had a chance to, watch our camping episode. Well, that means they've watched me with Shannon, enjoying our life. And so I feel really good about that. And, I guess I just feel it's an absolutely liberating feeling. But I think it's also a really good learning experience for people that are not aware of what goes on, in our private lives, in terms of we spend the first part of the day doing our own thing. She'll go play pickleball or whatever it is that she does during the first half of the day. And I'll be out hiking. And then we come together and have a cup of tea in the middle of the afternoon and catch up on the first half of the day, and then probably spend the rest of the day together. That is incredibly healthy, instead of living out of each other's, pockets in that sense. So we each have news to share with each other. And so it gives them a chance to see, oh, okay, so their relationship is similar to, theirs with their spouse. So I like being able to share that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How have you seen, how have you seen the community shift over the years?
So I've seen the community become more separated, which is disappointing to me, because what I saw was a community that rallied around common causes. And oh my God, we were all in with 2 feet. And if they were not ones that felt maybe inclined to be politically active, they were there rooting us on from behind the scenes. And that was absolutely okay, because I knew from my own position at the school board, I did not have a union behind me, but it all worked out. I was treated very well at the school board. So when I came out, I didn't have that as much of a concern as I thought it would be. So for people who might have, for whatever reason, maybe their own family abandonment or whatever issues they might feel would come to the forefront if they rallied around whatever cause people are going for in a more public manner. I understand that. I came from that. I get it. But I feel like we're more divided now. And I think the way that I see that we're more divided is we don't seem to have that common cause. What we have is pockets. And now we need to know which pocket we belong in. And I just know I belong in the pocket that is hopefully making life better for the majority. And I know I can't make it better for everybody. I know that. That would be unrealistic. But I guess that's the way I feel is I came from a background where we were closeted, and then we were grateful that we didn't have to be closeted, and we were fighting for a common cause. And I would really like if we maybe considered revisiting that.
So what would you like our youth, our younger queer folk, to understand about some of the struggles, but then the triumphs that came?
So I guess some of the struggles are such that they were real, where people could get fired. People could get disowned by their family. They could get, there were a lot of really serious ramifications for just simply being who we were. And it's not that that has completely disappeared from the lineup that some folks, the younger folks of today, are dealing with, because I think there's still a lot of religious decision-making being done in terms of if you fit into our family or our community, and that's unfortunate. We can understand those of us who have gone through those struggles. I can understand that. But I guess in order for us to feel that we can draw on each other's strength, if we were to sort of imagine we aren't all the same, and that is okay. So maybe just giving each other a little bit of a pass. If we aren't necessarily using the same language, if we aren't necessarily in the same pocket, I think that's maybe the best way to describe it. We just hope that maybe that pocket can be expanded to become a pouch. It can become a pouch that will include several pockets and that we're all in it together.
And I think I agree with you in missing that commonality, that common bond. That's, I'm missing that. And so what do you hope for our queer seniors as they are in their golden years and noticing some of what you've just talked about, the difference and the separations that have happened? And maybe it doesn't feel fun to be out together anymore. What do you hope for our queer seniors for the future?
I guess here's what I look at. We can't change anybody's view, but what we can do is we can show goodness. And if what you do is you show goodness in terms of how accepting you are of our differences with respect, then it's like, alrighty now let's jump into that pouch together, right? Let's come from a common direction where we can sort of make a path forward together.
Was there a defining moment of your journey that really helped you to get to that place where you can issue a pass, as you say, to people, or you can set aside what sometimes causes discomfort but really isn't worth causing an issue over? Is there sort of a defining moment that helped you to kind of cross that challenge, if you will, and be accepting and that it's okay?
Well, I think that's where maybe we can have a look at our own life and say, is there a point in time where I wish somebody had given me a pass? And if there is, and if things could have been different because somebody had given you a pass, whether it was a parent, whether it was a member of your religious community, if somebody had given you a pass, instead of having you feel less than because you didn't maybe meet a list of established criteria, this is now maybe where you can say, I don't want to continue in that vein and make others pay for the pass that I wasn't given. I understand how much better I would have felt if I'd been given a pass. So I think putting ourselves in another person's shoes is something that I think can make a big difference. And I think we have, I'm going to have to be honest, I feel as though in this day and age we have a lot less empathy. We're more motivated by what we want at this moment in time, as opposed to what we can see moving the common good forward.
And I'm wondering if that empathy isn't developing as much as it did because we don't do something for a common good. And that sometimes the collective good of the community overrides and supersedes the individual good.
One of the things that I think is paramount in life and was role modeled by my parents is the act of volunteering. If you are a volunteer, that means you are doing a service for free. And you are then gaining the benefit of knowing you are doing a job well done and contributing in some way. So I think that's where a lot of people feel they're too busy, and that's beyond me. And the reason I say it's beyond me is because I worked as a self-employed person, which means your day is never over. It's never over. And yet I was involved in volunteering in a variety of ways in the business community, but also with AWOL. AWOL never fell off the rails for me. So, but as a result, let me give that small example of AWOL. I got a wife out of the deal, right? If I hadn't have made my home available for the various events over time, did I have to clean up? Did I have to spend extra hours doing the AWOL news? Of course I did. But you know what? You will gain something in the process. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people would benefit from realizing, that you're not volunteering to get something. It's just something that happens. And so that's something that you won't know it unless you do it.
So looking back, you're in your senior years now.
Oh my God.
Just gently in your senior years now.
I was a young retiree.
I know.
But then I've continued to march on.
But what's the one thing that you would like those coming behind you to know? Is there that one piece that you either wish you had, or the one piece that you're most grateful for? What's the one thing that you really want the generations behind you to know?
I think two things that I've already said. Give people a pass. You know who I think is my closest friend? Her name is Karma. Don't carry grudges. Karma will take care of everything that you might feel is making you disinclined to sleep at night because there's a slight that's been caused by this or a slight caused by that. It'll all work itself out without you having to put in any negative effort or negative energy. So it's really a matter of give people a pass and volunteer your time. I never volunteer to do things I'm not interested in doing. So the biggest gift you can give anybody is your gift of time. And if you do that in the form of volunteering, you are going to be a contributor to making this world a better place, or this city, or this part of the community a better place.
Wise words of wisdom. Absolutely, I agree totally. And is there, when we look back, sometimes the kids will say, well, when you came out at whatever, and I was 40 when I came out. When you look back and you look at some of the really difficult moments that our community went through in protest marches and being imprisoned for absolutely no reason, in the oppression, in the firings, and all of those things, what's that sage advice then that you give to the youth who now think that the stuff that they're experiencing is the worst that's ever happened?
I will say to you, it is. It is the worst thing that you have faced. But the good thing is to know that you're in good company, because there's a lot of us that have gone through stuff. And I think sometimes it's a matter of wanting to find out what's your story and finding out that's where the common ground exists. You've had a bad experience. I may have had a bad experience. You can talk about those, but through that you want to find out, and what has happened to you since? Tell me about the great things that have happened since. That was probably character building, right? Character building, and from that you use that as a stepping stone to move on to the next place. And that's what we all want to do, is move on to the next chapter where we're not struggling, or not struggling as much, because now we've got life experience behind us and we're carrying that forward.
So what are you personally looking forward to?
Oh my gosh. Well, if you want to know what's really, really important to me right now, as I see everybody leaning in, just the camping trips that are ahead of us. You know, Shannon and I love our life together. And I think what's really important is to know your passion. What is it that matters to you? What is it that you want to spend your free time doing? And I know that a lot of times people imagine it's somewhere like away. And it can be away, but you can also enjoy what you're doing in your yard, because being away isn't going to solve what you're leaving behind. It's maybe giving you something to look forward to at that moment in time, so you become refreshed to maybe deal with what you've left behind.
Absolutely. And that is really important, to just give yourselves that time.
Right.
Yeah. Just be in each other's space.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other
Any closing remarks?
stories, highlights? Oh, Women of Excellence. Tell me about that. How surprised were you when you were nominated?
Yeah, it was a really, I guess, a surreal experience to be nominated for the Women of Excellence. For one, it was a fairly new category. It was called Breaking Barriers. So it was first created, I believe, in 2021. And this is an event which honors women every second year. And it's across southwestern Ontario. So Windsor, all the communities in between up to London. And so anyway, my name was put forward, and then what I needed to do is connect with people that had seen me through that 30-year experience of my coming out and being an activist and things like that, and having them write letters of support. And that means I went right back to one of my former managers at work at Investors Group, and other people that I was active with in the community. So it was also beautiful to see what it was that they wrote. So it was a wonderful recognition. Breaking Barriers is where you're also meant to give some sage advice to the young women who are sitting in the audience. And I know that from my speech, the one thing I wanted to drive home is you always want to conduct yourself with respect, where you are earning the respect of others who can help you to break barriers. And so that was kind of the parting message. I gave them a lot of the anecdotes that I've mentioned here. So those stories were fresh in my mind, because that honor was 2 years ago. And so I'm helping them out with this year's awards ceremony. And that's the thing, is what you do is I received what was a wonderful honor. And of course you want to give back and be able to see off the next round of honorees for this year. So, but I think that's the thing to kind of look at is, yes, it was out of the blue that I was being recognized, but it was a wonderful thing, and they did a really great job with putting together a video that gave some background of contributions that I've made over my life.
And thank you for sharing that with us too.
Yes,
Much
you're welcome.
appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I always like to wallow in your energy.
Well, thank you.
It's just that you've been that inspiration to just keep on going.
Well,
and we all do it, I think, in different ways, but you've just always been that person who just stuck it out, no matter what. And I just greatly appreciate that, this solid presence, and inspiring for many of us.
Well, I appreciate the invitation to be a part of this series. And Maggie, I also thank you for your contributions. And you've taken this Pride 55 and run with it, you along with Candace. I think this is great, because that speaks to my age. So, and that also means you guys do dances where I recognize the songs.
Exactly. That's our whole point.
Yeah, right. But anyway, no, it's been great. And also knowing that you came out during the time when we needed your help, back at the school board. So I appreciate your contributions as well.
Thank you.